Alright, how are you doing? He's hoping that all is well with you. It is our hope and sincere apologies also for those who have been trying to get in touch with us and maybe not been able to do that. But of course, two different ways of getting in touch with us. One of them is via Twitter at OneOnOneRW, or you can now get us on Facebook, and the Facebook page is OneOnOneRW. The show is One on One, and my name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. My guest in studio today was former Chief Prosecutor, and of course he's just chaired the committee or commission on the inquiry on the BBC's Rwanda's Untold stories. Welcome to the program, Mr. Martin.
Thank you for asking me.
It's good to have you on the show. Just a few weeks ago we had a show here, or a series called Ububarihe, and the aim of that was to check on some of the people that we were used to see on news or hear them on radio, and then we all of a sudden stopped seeing them because they either changed jobs or they moved to other departments. And so
you never invited us.
and so we're killing two birds with one stone.
Thank you.
So Uburihe, maybe we can start with that.
No, I'm around. I've been around in terms of occupation. I'm just registered as an advocate.
Okay.
But I've not had time to practice yet because as soon as I was sworn in, I was appointed to chair this committee. So I've been around.
So you've been around.
Yeah.
So right now, if someone has some legal problems, you're there.
Ah, yes.
Are you able to do it now?
It doesn't have to be a problem.
It can also be a good thing.
Very.
Let's talk about this inquiry then, because you've said that for close to four months now,
Yes.
you were dealing with meeting different people, doing your deliberations with your team, and you finally came out with a report that had also some recommendations, which we'll go deeper into. But the quick question that people are having in their minds is, how did they even do it? Because we didn't see them on the TVs, like live sessions when they were doing these inquiries and everything, and then all of a sudden they came up with a report. Maybe let's talk of the modalities that were used in doing this investigation into this documentary by the BBC.
Well, it would be a bit unfortunate if actually some of the people missed our sessions, but the inquiry was throughout conducted in public.
Mm-hmm.
We used the Telecom House facility. We invited the public to attend.
Mm-hmm.
The media was always there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, depending on the witness we had. Some of the witnesses were more attractive for the media to be very much in the presence, but it was open throughout. I think out of the total number of witnesses we invited, only one was heard in camera because of his personal circumstances. But the rest were heard in the public. And throughout, I don't have any recollection of any witness appearing in the absence of the media, so it was open.
Do you think actually it was necessary to constitute a committee to look into this issue? Because some people have also wondered of the expenses of having commissions when probably we can just directly say, you know what, we know that they did wrong. Do you think that there was need to set up this commission in the first place?
Possibly the authority that set up the commission will be in a better position to answer this. But if I have to, I think it was extremely important that this process had to take place because we had a problem. The documentary was out there, and as the report has indicated, it caused issues, and not simple issues, serious issues of national importance. So we had a problem that had to be, in one way or another, resolved. I realize it is not fully resolved, but the process we have just conducted is a step in the right direction. So I'm trying to imagine a situation where the commission had not been set up, the BBC had just been suspended, the documentary had been aired, we would have had an impasse, possibly with practical difficulties how to get out of it. So I think it was important to initiate this process.
It was important to initiate it, but then also let's talk of the constitution of this committee or this commission. I mean, there you are, those who would argue and say, what other response or result would we have expected from this commission? I mean, Martin Ngoga, former chief prosecutor, I mean, a person who's been there working closely with the government. He's also Rwandese. I mean, for the BBC's side, I mean, was this breaking news for them? The result of this finding?
I think the other question would be what would have been the alternative. if we agree that we needed this process, then who could have been the right members to be appointed to the committee? I think what should be important is to look at what we did substantively, read the report, agree with it or criticize it from the basis of the content, not the personal circumstances of members who constituted the team. Even if I believe that members were appointed on the basis of their competencies, past or present, I don't see a situation where anybody would say...
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, exactly. And conflict of interest is not imaginary. It should be, whoever alleges conflict of interest should be able to demonstrate it with evidence. And what happened here is not unusual. When the UK had an issue, I think when someone had committed suicide, Dr. Kelly, it was about the BBC again, they appointed the former judge to conduct the inquiry. Most recently, when they had an issue with News of the World, they initiated an inquiry that was headed by British nationals. They never went outside their borders to look for people who would look neutral in that logic. So I don't think when Rwandans have issues to resolve, they necessarily have to look for people outside, even when they have internal competencies, just to satisfy imaginary allegations that people may think the process was not fair or not independent. So I confirm that we conducted a very fair and a very independent process, and we are ready to be criticized, but we hope the criticism should be substantive.
Substantive. So personally, did you have any difficulties, dealing with that part? Because as I said earlier on, those would argue along those lines that I just mentioned. On a personal level, I'm sure you must have watched the documentary, and you also had a personal opinion. And during this particular process of chairing this commission, did you have difficulties being neutral?
Not at all. Possibly my background helps me in that. I had been a prosecutor for many, many years, and I'm Rwandan. So I should have my personal feelings on the genocide and the other cases I dealt with. But I always have had the ability to draw a line between my personal convictions or emotions and what I have to do professionally. So it was never difficult for me throughout this inquiry to draw that line. There is my own view about the documentary, but there is what I had to gather from witnesses, weigh it against the rules, against the standards, against the laws, and that's what other members were doing as well. So the product we have is not a product of emotions or sentiments, it's a product of a scientific work done in the open, in the full view of everyone, and much dependent on the evidence we collected from the witnesses we carefully chose and invited here based on their accomplishments, their competencies. Remember, we invited academics, we invited the senior journalists, we invited the researchers. So those are the ones whose evidence actually informed the documentary and not personal convictions of any member of the committee.
Okay. So looking at the recommendations that you've come up with, you've come up with several recommendations. Among them, the withdrawal of the revocation of the agreement between the government and the BBC. And the BBC has come out in response to your report, and they have actually said or mentioned how saddened they are by the findings of the report, and they insist that they still stand by their journalism.
Yeah, but what they have not done is to deal with the content of the report. It's very easy to make the simplistic response like, I'm sad, I'm not happy, I'm disappointed. I don't think, I hope they will be happy with the outcome of the report. But it's just a 43-page document. Anyone could read it. So we are waiting for the BBC to respond on the basis of the content. And
not just what they have seen in the media.
Exactly, not just what we have seen in the media, but also not making these simple comments like, we stand by our independence. Yes, we believe we should be independent, and actually we cannot have an alternative other than having the media that is independent, not only in the UK, or not only the BBC, but everywhere. Even in Rwanda, we need an independent media. But But what do they have to say about the content of the report that is fully weighed against their own standards? We are accusing the BBC of having been in breach of their own standards, and we have provided evidence of that. So we would like to see their response actually dealing with those real issues, and not just being globalized into a simple statement like we are saddened. I actually think there is even an issue of attitude, because we are dealing with a serious issue: genocide denial, genocide revisionism. We have produced the report. There is evidence why we arrived at
what you arrived at.
what we arrived at. And what we would expect from the BBC is a substantive response, not just simple comments like I've seen in the media.
Substantive response, indeed, but then you also recommend prosecution. You've said they need to be, taken to court and charged for denying the genocide and revising it. But then the question comes and say, and one might wonder, how are you going to do that? In which court? And what would be the process of even doing that? How easy would it be to prosecute or to charge an international media? Would it be done here in Rwanda? Would you charge them on another court? Where? How?
Yes, I think when I was launching the report, I made a comment that I may have to repeat here. First of all, prosecution or not prosecuting is something that is fully in the competence of the prosecution authority. And one of the choices they may have to make if they want to is not to do it because they retain the discretion to look at all the circumstances and decide what to do. And when we also made this recommendation, we are not being naive to assume that it is actually very easy dealing with the BBC in the way we suggested, or dealing with any foreigner when he engages in a genocide, denial, or revisionism. But we had a choice to make between standing by the principle and what the law demands and going for simple solutions. And we chose not to trade the principle for simple solutions. When you are dealing with the law, and when you have arrived at a conclusion that there was breach of the law, you have very limited choices to make. And in the view of the committee, we had no any other choice to make other than recommend prosecution. We are talking about a criminal law. And when the criminal law has been breached, there must be penal consequences. So that is the proposal we made. And we leave it to the authorities to decide, the competent authorities to decide. But we think it is possible. Yes, it is not without challenges, actually serious challenges.
Would you share with us?
Again, I don't think as a nation we should be going for simple solutions.
So you've thrown a heavy one on the authorities here.
They should be prepared to deal with the heavy issues. And I think they have dealt with the heavier issues before, so I don't think this is one of the biggest.
What would be the way forward? I mean, because you say that indeed it is not going to be easy. I mean, there's several challenges that they may come along when they will be going for that recommendation that you made. What are those challenges that you
The challenges you are dealing, first of all, the first challenge is you are dealing with foreign nationals, people that you don't have within your own jurisdiction. So there is even a question of accessibility. The other issue is we were conducting an inquiry and it had its own threshold. And for a decision to prosecute, you need another threshold, which means the prosecution may need to do some additional work, which they should do, should they decide to take that route. So they are actually not very unusual challenges. This is a jurisdiction that has been dealing with fugitives all over the world. There are some challenges we face, for example, when we are trying to get fugitives prosecuted here or to get them prosecuted abroad or even gathering evidence against them. dealing with the jurisdictions in foreign countries that know very little about the country and whose standards are different. So they are common problems that our authorities have been going through. So they are used to that.
So in the end then, when you talk of the issue of the two recommendations that we just touched on, one of them the revocation of this agreement between government and the BBC, and some quarters have also been reporting that you have recommended the ultimate withdrawal of the BBC's license here in Rwanda, the Kenya-Rwanda broadcast that normally happen here, the Kahunzi Mirango. And someone might wonder and say, but look, that was not this BBC that is here. That was BBC Two. And BBC Two is not us. Why are you victimizing us?
Maybe before I go to that, there is a point I don't want you to lose. Because you asked me something about the prosecution. And when we recommended court action, we didn't only recommend prosecution. Prosecution is part of that bigger recommendation that is particularly about the breach of our law on genocide, denial, and revisions. But there is another court action that we suggested should take place. That is a civil process. Because we invited the BBC here. We wanted to interact with them. There are some questions we wanted to ask them, in which we think only the BBC could answer them. The kind of questions that would elicit some answers exclusively in the hands of the BBC. And we had an unfortunate situation whereby the BBC declined to appear. And so we have recommended a civil process that should take place to compel the BBC to disclose certain information, such as whose idea was it in the first place to have this very damaging.
So you can be able to narrow down to specific individuals.
Yeah, exactly. Who funded it? Because we don't believe, especially after the BBC had its own internal inquiry and came up with a conclusion that suggests they don't see anything wrong. We thought it's no longer an issue of oversight. It's no longer an issue of institutional laxity. It looks like it's an issue of constitutional conspiracy, institutional conspiracy. And there must be a bigger scheme behind it. So we want all these issues exhausted. Whose idea was it? Who provided the funding? What was the interest? So as a committee, we were unable to access that information, but we suggested to the authority here. These are very pertinent issues that you cannot just let go. There should be a court process, possibly in the UK, to try and compel the BBC to make those disclosures. So now I come back to
the question of the BBC in Rwanda.
Yeah, the BBC in Rwanda. The BBC has been operating under a particular agreement that allows it to use our FM frequencies. And that is what we suggested should be terminated. I said before, and I want to repeat here, that it is again for the licensing authority to determine what is included in that particular agreement.
Yes.
But as far as we know, it involves all the broadcasts that the BBC could broadcast in Rwanda through FM frequencies. So our interpretation was that, because I know, as you said, some people are saying this was only about the radio, and the documentary was aired on BBC Two, actually in the UK, so the two are not related. But we didn't want, as a committee, to take that simplistic view of interpreting an agreement, because an agreement is entered on purpose. And this agreement was entered between the Rwandan government and the BBC as an entity.
So whether it's BBC Two, BBC
the
One,
BBC as an entity. Because it would not make sense. If you may try to think what should be the alternative interpretation. The alternative could be that yes, the BBC commits not to broadcast certain contents on FM, but they are free to do so in their other infrastructure, like they did when they aired the documentary on BBC Two. So if that was the interpretation,
so it makes it clear.
Other serious issues come again here. Would rural or rainfall or any Rwandan organ be competent to enter an agreement of that nature that allows an entity you are entering an agreement with to use its variety of facility to contravene what is actually prohibited under this
This
particular
other
agreement.
particular
That
agreement.
can happen because it could even raise some constitutional issues. As a country, we have our constitutional prohibitions, and we can't deal with anyone who engages in things we prohibit under our constitution and our laws. So, apart from interpreting this agreement in a broader way, to suggest that what is prohibited under this agreement, what you can't do on our FM, you can't do
Also,
even on your other infrastructure you have. That is the only interpretation the committee could see. The rest would be...
And so the current agreement does not specify, does not include this agreement. And so that's why you're saying it has to be terminated, and a fresh agreement that involves that agreement is put in place.
But again, our proposal, our recommendation to terminate the agreement is not informed by, or it's not motivated by the lack of certain clarity in the way it is written, but it is based on the fact that there has been breaches, repeated breaches of the same, and the spirit of the object and the purpose of the agreement has been fundamentally rendered useless. The dispensation is no longer tenable to allow the parties to continue to work together. So our proposal for a fresh start, actually we are not emphasizing on a new agreement because the agreement is just a facility, but we are proposing a fresh start that must be characterized by the new spirit, the new attitude, because there are issues of attitude. Issues of one party disregarding the concerns of another. Issues of one party being so insensitive to very serious issues of the other party. So actually what the two parties should be looking for when they start a new relationship, if they will, is to change the attitude. Otherwise, the agreement is just a detail.
Do you see this happening? Because look at the response that is coming immediately after the release of your report. Look at the arguments that are being given that, look, you seem to want to silence us on our freedom to be independent, to say things as they are. I mean, do you see this happening, what you're suggesting?
Well, I don't want to speculate about it. Maybe this could be comments being done because the parties have found themselves in a situation, and when they get cooler at a later point, they could make more sensible responses. But I think, there is freedom of press. Nobody is arguing about it. But freedom of press, free speech, all are subject to limitation. And what we did in the report is actually to show how excessive the BBC has been in venturing into those limitations through the documentary itself, but also through other previous broadcasts they have been doing in our other programs.
Yes.
So we are saying the BBC crossed the line. The BBC did not observe limitations. We are not arguing about them being independent. They have to. And there's no alternative to that. But they have to observe limitations that are not only in the Rwandan law, but they are internationally recognized. We actually premised our report on borderless values. And we have a very fortunate situation whereby Rwandan laws regarding free speech and freedom of the press are actually the same. They are copy-pasted from the international norms and international conventions, with an exception of our laws on genocide, denial, and revisionism that you may not find in other countries for a very good reason. Those other countries they don't have genocide, but they have laws punishing denial and punishing revisionism of the Holocaust. Yeah, so there is nothing extraordinary, nothing unusual. It's actually for the BBC to come back to senses and think objectively.
The issue of this law that we keep talking about, keep mentioning, and of course, which was the bone of contention in this documentary between Rwanda and the BBC, international organizations or institutions, like even the BBC, might say that this law against genocide denial is actually being used as a political tool to wage political wars. That it is just there as a stopping thing that the government always uses whenever we are doing anything. I mean, how then do you vindicate yourself from such kind of allegations and make people understand that indeed, look, it is beyond just that?
That would be a very ridiculous allegation on the part of the BBC, because what if we said they also use the laws against the Holocaust denial and revisionism to suppress dissent, as they accuse us? Because as I'm saying, what they don't allow in their own jurisdictions, they should think we should allow in our own jurisdiction. When we prosecute people for genocide denial and revisionism, we use case law that we fetch from European courts. They had the Holocaust 60 years ago, and they still prosecute people who deny it. So how would they expect us to go away with deniers of genocide, to let them go free about the genocide that happened only 21 years ago? So I think it's an issue of double standard, an issue of some countries thinking they are wiser than others in terms of how they can think for their communities, for their people. We think we need the law that punishes those who engage in denial and revisionism. We also think they need the law that punishes those who deny the Holocaust and actually the genocide. Even about how we reacted, the BBC aired this documentary. And the same week when our committee started hearings, the regulator in the UK had an issue with the Russian radio that they were accusing of not being impartial and balanced in the way they were covering a certain plane crash that happened in Ukraine. So that was an issue that pitted the UK regulator, the equivalent of ruler, against a Russian radio on a subject that happened in Ukraine. And I think it is unusual for us to deal with their own entity on a subject that concerns us. So I think it is an issue of being objective.
Double standards. And so such thoughts and such statements, for those who are on the side of the BBC, they might use it, or they might sort of think that, look, they went into this commission with an already, made up mind that this is how we do things, this is what we do, and so we deserve this.
Maybe we should, would it be a suggestion that we should have walked into the process as just blind people, senseless people? Of course, we are responsible people. We know the realities of our country, we know the laws, we know the standards, we are not ignorant on most of the issues surrounding this problem. But again, as I said in the beginning, I'm waiting for the BBC itself, for anyone to criticize the report on the basis of its content. They should not look at Martin Ngoga and what he has been doing before, or whoever was a member of the committee and what he has been, or his relationships or his affiliations. They just have to look at the report and its content. And
counter it based on the content.
Exactly.
Okay.
Any other approach would be just an excuse.
Okay. So the recommendations you've made, what are the possibilities of them being implemented, and how soon do you think that they will be implemented?
We really don't know. As a committee, we don't know how soon the authorities will react on the report. We don't even know
if they will.
But and we are ready to take whatever decision they choose. We have done our job. We want to go beyond this point to insist on what should happen or what, because our mandate doesn't allow us to extend that far. But we trust the objectivity with which we conducted the process. We trust the objectivity in the recommendations we make.
Yes.
We believe the authorities will find them useful, and we hope it's actually the view of the committee that it won't take long before the authorities take some action. And I think they also have an obligation to act. Let the Rwandans to know what path they will have taken, because we have a situation where there is a kind of an impasse. The BBC has been suspended. We conducted an inquiry. We recommended for the termination of the agreement. We made several other recommendations. So it's an issue of accountability on the part of the authority to let the Rwandan population to know which way forward.
So if all factors remain constant, if the BBC remains defiant, it says, you know what, we don't really feel like what you did has come out with the real truth behind what we did, and sticks to their guns and doesn't come back on the real issues in your report. I mean, and maybe the government or whoever is supposed to implement, RURA, the regulator, if things remain the way they are, I mean, what are we looking at?
I don't want to speculate about that, and I don't think, at least from the point of view of the Rwandan authorities, they are not used to being indecisive on serious issues. So I'm not even imagining that situation happening. There has to be a decision one way or the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll finish with a question that there's one of our listeners who's on Twitter called Rosine. She wanted to know, and she has asked me to ask you your achievements. If you can touch on some of the achievements that you had when you were the Prosecutor General. It's always good to talk to our listeners.
Well, very difficult for me to assess myself. Well, I did my best. I made my contribution. I had a very good team that was working with me, and who, some of them, took the mantle of the institution. They are running it very well. So we were dealing with a kind of a task that will be and will remain a challenge for a long time to come, which means practically impossible for anyone, not just me, but even, I think, even those who succeeded me, to point at an achievement. What we do and what we will continue to do in turn is to set a ground for continuity, because the challenge ahead of us as a country that suffered the genocide, with so many fugitives abroad, is still massive. And actually, as time goes on, that's when we realize actually the massive nature and the gravity of the problem ahead of us. So I think what's more important for me is that we set the ground, we made our contribution, but we can't claim to have.
So there's nothing you can touch on and say, as Martin, I believe this was as a result of my effort.
Why can't I leave this to Rosine and others who have been observing what I did to be the ones to assess me?
So they should be the ones to say whether you failed or you didn't fail.
Exactly. That's the better.
Okay. And what happened? I mean, that those who would also want to know, I mean, what happened? What led to your exit from this position?
No, I was appointed as Prosecutor General by the appointing authority, and the same wisdom and the same authority chose to replace me with another equally or possibly more competent Prosecutor General. So that's how it happens, that's how it should always happen, that's how it will continue to happen. Yeah, we serve to the pleasure of the appointing authority, and when it's no longer time for us to do that, in the opinion of the appointing authority, we would question that.
Okay. Yeah. You miss the job, or you feel more comfortable
I
where you are
liked it
today?
when I was doing it, and I am sure I will continue to be comfortable with whatever I do next in my career.
Okay. Yeah. So you don't want to choose from the options I gave you. Like, do you miss the job, or you feel more comfortable where you are today?
I liked it when I was doing it. I will like what I will do next.
Okay. Martin Ngoga, thank you for your time. Asante sana for sharing with us the information containing in your report. How do you feel? I mean, people walking out and putting you in history books among the people who had their commission. It's named after the Ngoga Commission. This is some of the titles that people are putting out there.
No, it's not just the title. The title comes along with the content,
yes.
And as they put it, the level is in the details.
Yes.
So it will depend on what comes along with the title. But I was very happy and actually grateful to the authorities that had confidence in me and wonderful members that I had in the committee to be tasked with this. We were happy that we were trusting to handle this subject, and we did our best to handle it the best way we could. And personally, and I believe other members of the committee, we are a kind of people that are always ready and happy to contribute.
Okay.
For whatever is of interest to our country.
To the nation. Thank you so much for your time again.
Thank you.
Asante. There you have it. One-on-one with none other than Martin Ngoga, the former Prosecutor General and the chair of the Commission of Inquiry into the BBC's documentary Rwanda's Untold Stories right here on One. Whether the recommendations will just be shelved or action will be taken according to the recommendations is only an issue of time, and only time will tell. It's a wrap, and we thank you for watching, and we thank you also for listening. Stay in touch with us, 101RW, that's the hashtag to use. Follow us on Twitter at 1on1RW, or you can also like our Facebook page, 1on1RW. My name as always is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye for now.